I'm back for day 2, summation of the trial of George W. Wagner IV for the murder of the Roden families. This is a death penalty case, and unfortunately, we no longer have video and audio of this because out of nowhere, the judge decided we don't need it anymore, so you have to read the summations at the end of the day. Today we had 5 witnesses that were called by the prosecution, I believe. We have the 3 family members that found the original group of Chris Sr. and Gary Roden, a deputy, I believe, that was the first on scene, and a paramedic that I assume declared them dead. First was Bobby Jo Manley. She is Dana Roden's sister, and she is who found Chris and Gary's bodies, and then also found Frankie and Hannah Hazel Gilley's bodies. She was at the house on Union Hill Road in Pike County, which is on the Adams County border in southern Ohio. She cleaned his property and fed his animals, like I said, in exchange for living on his property. She was there to do her chore that day and I guess was going into town later. So she had her friend Billy Morgan and his wife, I believe her name was Emma, with them. She said she arrived at the house about 7:30. The door was locked. She used a hidden key that was up in the gutter and had to have help to get it down, but came in and found in the back bedroom Chris and Gary piled on top of one another, and there was blood all over the house. They were covered with a blanket. She said she moved the blanket, saw their bodies, and knew they were dead. Another trigger warning for the really sad stuff with the kids. But unfortunately, it's going to come up several times in this trial because they left the kids unharmed, but they left them in the houses. When Bobby Jo found that, she ran next door to Frankie Roden's house, which is Chris Sr.'s oldest son. He lived there with his fiance, his 3-year-old son from another relationship, and his infant son, I believe he was 6 months old, with Hannah Hazel. The older son answered the door, told Bobby Jo that Daddy had a lot of blood. She got inside, went in there, found Frankie and Hannah in bed, covered in blood, not breathing, and apparently dead. And in another really sad twist, between them was another one of their children, a newborn baby who was breastfeeding on Hannah's deceased body. She grabbed the children, took them out of the crime scene because she said she just couldn't leave them like that, and went outside to wait for the deputies. On cross-examination, she was asked about the illegal cockfighting and drug deals because there were rumors about Chris Sr. being involved in that. She said she didn't know anything about that, but she would feed the chickens on the land. They asked her about Jake being on the property. She said she saw him there a couple times. They asked if she knew anything about out-of-country trips that Chris would sometimes take. She said she didn't know anything about that he would leave for several days at a time, and he had security cameras on the property. And naturally, at one time, she had a romantic relationship with one of the other victims, Kenneth Roden. They talked about this on the podcast, but towards the beginning, Bobby Jo and her brother were considered suspects for this, and there was a charge against her brother for destroying police property. Part 2. Day 2, part 2. Second, we had Billy Morgan, who was with Bobby Jo Manley when she came to do her chores. They did a really sad explanation of him that kind of makes me mad because just as a side note that people talk about people from this general region like we're stupid and like we're hillbillies, and they really, I believe this is written by people that are up closer to Columbus, and they really made a point of making a whole paragraph about what this guy was wearing and making us all look like complete idiots. Morgan testified that he did not know how old, but that he was born in the 70s and that he could not read or write. He was wearing his best outfit to court that day, which was a jean jacket and a green t-shirt. He had straight hair and a beard and held his head low throughout his testimony. Many answers were hard to understand as he murmured and spoke softly, usually replying in one word. So basically all we got out of his testimony is that he'd only been around for about a month, but he saw Billy Wagner visit Chris Roden's driveway a few times and that Chris and Billy would meet in the truck and talk. Third was James Manley, who is Bobby Jo's brother. This is the one that originally they thought was potentially a suspect. He came when Dana called him after she called the deputies, and he is the one that went up the road to Dana's house to check on her. He's who found her dead. He went to Dana's to tell her what had happened because his cell phone was without minutes. He arrived, found the door ajar, went to Dana's bedroom, found her with a comforter on her bed, with a pillow over her face. The pillow was sticking to Dana's face, and that's when he knew she was dead. They cross-examined and asked him for a few random things about the cockfighting, if he knew the Wagners, etc., and then they went on break. I'm going to skip and do the last testimony of the day first and then go back and do the deputies because this is a little bit longer, and sum up day 2 in one more video. Just hit my lip. Paramedic Justin Waring was the last witness called. He testified he was the first EMS crew on scenes of the homicide. He was dispatched for assaults. I keep doing this, sorry. For assaults at Frankie and Hannah Hazel Gilly's house, where he went in, found them deceased. He declared them dead on scene and was then leaving to go to an EMS staging area that the then sheriff set up, I believe, at the church down the road. Don't mind the dog toy. On cross, he was asked if rigor mortis had set in. He said he didn't know because he didn't touch the body. Now, I will point out that this is an extremely rural area. EMS is 15 to 20 minutes away, and that's if they're sitting in the truck, ready to go, and can run hot. And I'm not surprised. Part 3. Day 2, Part 3, George Wagner murder trial. Again, this is a death penalty trial, so this is going to go on like 6 to 8 weeks. I may or may not do daily ones. We'll see, probably when there's interesting stuff, but towards the beginning, there's going to be some pretty interesting stuff. So next, we're going to do the next to last witness, which was Deputy Jonathan Chandler. He is now Sergeant Jonathan Chandler with the Pike County, Ohio Sheriff's Office. At the time, he had been a deputy for about a year, and he was the first deputy dispatched to the homicides. Same as with EMS, the sheriff's office is very far from this site. If there happened to be one in Piketon or in western Pike County where I live, this is still multiple minutes away, even absolutely flooring it going down the highway. He was initially dispatched to the home of Chris Roden, which is 4077 Union Hill Road. Before he could make it, was flagged down by several people next door at Frankie Roden's house. He stopped and he saw that the Manley family was there and that the children were outside and they were covered head to toe in blood. I know I keep doing that, but it's easier than saying quote unquote. The family was very frantic, very upset, very emotional. He said the blood on the children was not theirs, but was that of the dead bodies inside. He went in and saw them apparently dead. He said they knew they were dead because there were pools of blood in the middle of the bed and that Frankie had bruising and gunshot wounds to his head. He would go on to work until 2 a.m. the next day, having clocked in at 7 a.m. He told the jury his last act before going home was going to Dana Roden's house and helping BCI, the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, that then Charlie Reeder called in almost immediately because this was incredibly over their heads. But he helped BCI agents remove the 3 bodies from the home. Prosecutors were sure to ask him about the shoes he was wearing at the scene. That's going to come up later when they talk about the murder shoes that I mentioned in the first part of part 1, or one of the parts of part 1, because there were footprints left in blood through some of the houses. There were 3 pictures that they have on the news site that were presented today as evidence. I don't know if I can show them or not. Again, this is on SciotoValleyGuardian.com, SCIOTO ValleyGuardian.com. If you go and look at day 2, the pictures are there, but I'm not trying to get TikTok banned. So the first one is a picture of a floor, and it shows 2 different types of wooden flooring, some dog food scattered on the floor, a pocket knife, some kind of, I'm not a tool person, some kind of wrench or something, and an air vent, and there is clotted blood all over the place. The second picture they show is a further out picture of the same thing, showing the inside of the house of Chris Sr.'s house. There's a recliner, deer heads all over the wall, and you can see there's blood dragging going across the floor and a giant pool of blood in the back. They also showed the outside of Chris Sr.'s trailer. They also showed Frankie and Hannah's trailer. Last one for today, a few more odds and ends that I've read from different places that are reporting on it. Again, there is no audio for today, and there was very little video of some people. Court TV is doing it, some other people are doing it, but they take breaks and stuff, so that it's not very comprehensive. So it's important to note that Jake Wagner, the father of Sophia, who allegedly all of this started over, took a plea deal on the 5th anniversary of the crimes back in April of 2021, basically taking the death penalty off the table for himself. And I've actually read that he took the death penalty off the table for his family members, but they're saying this is a death penalty case. So I don't know if they're expecting Jake to plead the 5th and it would negate his deal and then it would become death penalty, or if it is death penalty. So I'm not 100% clear on that. I've heard both ways. I'll try to figure it out. It's also important to note that after Jake flipped, his mother, Angela, also did. Now, the murder charge was dropped against Angela. She got some kind of conspiracy and plotting and that sort of thing. Thank you, buddy. My son just brought me some Pringles. In Angela's confession, she confessed a lot of things. Also, she confessed the thing about George having nightmares and said, I don't know why he was having nightmares because he didn't kill anybody. She confessed that the family took a vote on whether they would commit the murders, and both her sons and husband said yes. That is not uncommon. That's what we've gathered from this family, even prior to the confessions, is that they did everything together, and that everything they did, including the move they made to Alaska, which was a whole other tangent, was done by family vote. Prosecutors claim that Billy lured Christopher Sr. to his death by setting up a fake lucrative drug deal at the Union Hill property before he was shot dead. And if you remember, I mentioned that he had called Chris Sr. About a $30,000 marijuana deal out west. Angela also confessed that George and Jake were hidden in the car and accused of ambushing Hannah Roden's father, Chris Sr., before going on to 3 other homes along the road. So a few places that you can watch this. If you are on Facebook, you can look at the Scioto Valley Guardians page. It's SCIOTO Valley Guardian on Facebook. I believe they are live streaming when possible. And then according to some other things, there is a channel called Law and Crime. Around here, it is channel 252 on Dish, if you have that. They are broadcasting it live as well. There, like I said, there are some parts that are going to be muted and potentially not shown. Something with the judges and the witnesses that don't want to be on there. I don't really understand the full extent of that. Law and Crime also has a YouTube channel where they are apparently live streaming it as well. It's also on Court TV, but they interrupt for other things as well, so I don't know how reliable their coverage is, but